I mean, I come from a place of privilege, and I think you do too, James, and Edward does too. He's in Germany. The sacrifices we have to make are insignificant compared to people that are in poverty. The guest I had on the last time, Purple, he was telling me about an abortion.
Yeah,
It
I
was
watched that a
after.
bit. Yeah.
They threw the baby on the ground. So I'm like, how much longer do we have to wait? I mean, incremental change could have been a difference in a scenario like that. I mean, it's just like, that's how sad it's got. I'm not saying, yay, it's a win overall. But what if that more liberal, like a California approach, was able to get into Mississippi? I don't know the answer, but I think if we start engaging in local politics, that probably will challenge the system. Sure, let's do that. But if we have to make that difference on a national scale, I mean, I'm going to vote
another reason, though, Emiliano, to bring things back to where the majority of day-to-day impact on our lives should be decided by state politics and below.
Yeah.
Being dependent on national politics for this much is too much.
That's what I've been saying this whole time.
No. Yeah, but like at the same time, like
that's what I said to you before
when you're talking about the national level, but we still have to we still have to basically gut the Republican and Democrat parties.
I agree. That's how you do it. You've got to do that.
Or just make them irrelevant.
Fine tuning.
Yeah.
What's that? I'm sorry, Edward.
Just make them irrelevant.
You can't do that on a national level.
World,
they control the debate stage,
parties
man.
whatsoever.
How can you challenge someone to get the mass?
Yeah, but you don't have to vote. You can vote for other people who are not on the debate stage. I mean, Americans are creative enough, savvy enough to make some kind of grassroots, campaign, who, like you say, okay, marketing and that kind of stuff, social media, make everybody do a dance or something, and it's so cool. And it's some kind of rhyme that's like, which
demographic always votes? I mean, which demographic always votes?
I don't know, older or younger, what?
It's usually older
people, and they're usually tend to be more in touch with current issues that are happening with the youth.
But, I mean,
if we do that and we rely on that demographic to lead this country, I think there's some problems that are unforeseeable by you two. I mean, to be honest, I don't want out of touch people that are in their wonder years taking charge of the direction of this country. They don't have a nuanced approach of this issue.
Yeah, I mean, but that's my point. Start a really cool movement that is pro. I don't know. I mean, pro-human or just.
There are movements. That's another conversation that James and I had.
That's not Democrat and that's not Republican. And
we already have them.
Who?
There's a lot more youth actually voting.
I don't know of any.
Younger people are
the Independent Party, the Libertarian Party, the Green Party.
1%, 2%. They're nothing. I mean, right?
There could be something on a lower level and get that momentum.
Yeah, you're right there. I take your point on voting local.
But I'll ask James, who's the libertarian running in your area?
I have no idea.
Exactly.
I have no idea.
I can give you somebody that's a green candidate around in my city. People, you need to hold yourself accountable.
That's a good point, Jim.
I mean, that's the thing that's really frustrating. People use so much energy to justify the moral high ground with national politics. That's just you're punching in the dark. It really is just frustrating. And then, you know what? I'm not going to go ahead and give the Republicans the ability to appoint another conservative Supreme Court justice. I'm sorry. I mean, we could debate that, and I don't think you're going to have the moral high ground with some of these decisions that have just been made. They're not even popular with most Americans. So I don't understand how people make sense of that. And then one of the things that I think that would help in the national arena is to put back League of Women Voters to run the debates instead of being ran by the DNC and the RNC. To have like
there's so many changes that have gone.
It used to be how
22 decades.
I would almost like to invite a different country's representative to come in.
I'm down for
moderate
that.
our debates.
Like, what makes this country less embarrassing? This side or this side?
It's gotten down to that, yeah.
Yeah. That's why
I'm
I
trying
want
to,
to talk.
maybe Switzerland would be a good candidate. They're known for neutrality.
They want to stay out of everything here. They wouldn't
Yeah.
get into
Well, they're definitely more
politics.
inclusive with their society.
But
They
could they
they
be a
like their
good
mountains and
debate
they stay there and they have their nice society.
moderator?
Are
You
they
know what I
pretty?
mean?
Mhm.
Would they be a
Yeah,
fair debate moderator? That's what I'm getting at.
I mean, we don't, the thing is, we don't need debates. We need every week, we need politicians to be on these kinds of conversations. They have
Oh
time.
yeah,
We give them time. We pay them. They
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
get onto these conversations and be grilled.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
But they aren't.
I-
These debates are, I mean, there should be able to be somebody like Joe Rogan who people have heard and basically trust more or less, who just wins even though he's not on a debate. That has to happen at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that was my main ambition, get a good enough following to actually have local politicians on. I would have liked to start like that. I mean, not like to start like that. I mean, end up like that, but get that momentum and then
Cool, yeah.
hopefully talk to state politicians and have these conversations, because that would be cool, like have a Joe Rogan format with local politicians. And then they would
That's
be
cool.
shamed if they didn't get to go on the show. He's like, hey, that guy's fair. Why didn't you want to talk to him? And I noticed this kind of behavior when I addressed right-wingers. My first couple of videos, they were talking a whole bunch of smack. And when I came up talking very calmly, I saw that kind of like that accountability scares people off. And of course, I'm going to be biased because I'm not right-leaning. I know you guys don't like that label, but it's very easy. If I were to show you a picture of A or B, you guys would probably be able to identify what they're.
Yeah, I mean, more or less
I
everybody
take the
knows what
pictures.
that is, but the thing is, it's becoming more and more vague because I've been called a right winger.
Well, you're a Republican too. I mean, they're typically going to be signed
but
to
I'm-
more corporate free
Yeah, but
market.
it's just vague.
That's
It's not
leaning. That's no vagueness.
not
I mean, if
useful.
you have, well,
But
I
I'm
mean,
not right wing. I mean, when you say right wing, I mean,
you're thinking of the social element. I'm thinking of the economic element.
it's like when you call somebody a communist, a socialist, a Marxist, a Nazi. I mean, it's just they don't.
Or
These
those are-
terms don't mean anything. I mean, just we should. I think you can agree. We should more and more
well,
talk
it
about
sounds like
issues
you
like
agreed to me
poverty.
when you asked me for my definition of that, and I gave you something. You said that's quote worthy.
Yeah,
and that was
right.
me
But that's
defining the
your
right wing.
yeah, sure, and that's your definition. But other people understand right wing differently.
I think when I mean, because when I
Well,
gave
they
that
do.
same definition, well, I mean, based on what I had experienced, I gave other people that same definition and they agreed to it. Based on my personal experience, I can only
That could
speak
be
from
right.
that.
Yeah.
But I gave that definition to Clay. I gave that definition
But
to
more people,
Mm.
but more people would agree on terms like poverty, terms like violence, and
Well, then how come
immigration
nothing's
and
been
that kind
done
of
about it then?
What?
I think
Because the
people aren't
politicians
talking
do
about
just
these
enough to keep
topics.
themselves in office and not a half
Yeah.
a hair
So
more.
there you go again, blaming politicians because of us.
Hell yeah, I do blame the
It's
politicians.
us.
Yeah.
It's
They're
us.
supposed to be leaders.
They're getting
Leaders are
paid by
supposed
us.
to
Yeah.
lead. Everyone else, by definition, is a follower.
I don't know if they're supposed to be leaders. They're our workers. They're like hiring a developer to code.
And if they're not
this-
doing their job, it's our job to fire them and hold them accountable.
Yeah,
And we're not
exactly.
doing that.
right, but
the
we
thing
should.
is-
That's true.
We should.
And then the thing is, like when you have so much poverty in one area for so long, I mean, basic problem solving skills is just to investigate the factors of why that hasn't changed. I mean, you're going to have to develop labels to help people understand those factors. And I just
Well,
think
you
it's
just talk in more accurate terms. Don't
okay.
you
Well,
don't need to
okay. Well,
develop labels.
help me
Like
then.
like
Help me
poverty.
identify why there's
Poverty.
more poverty in a state that's ran by a specific party versus another. Well, how would you describe that to find a
I mean,
solution?
just talk to those people about poverty. What do they think about poverty? And when they start to say, well, because I'm or I'm say, well, what do you mean by that? I mean, are you for poverty or not? And you know, I mean, you'll just get interesting
I can tell you what
information.
they
Like,
say. Want me to
well,
tell you?
it's like with James's example. I mean, they're for immigrants if it's his wife. They're against immigrants if it's
I'm
not.
talking about
I mean,
poverty. You're talking about something else now.
yeah, but it's the same for poverty. I mean, it's for they're for and they're for helping people who are poor if they know them. If they don't, they're not. And that's
Okay, I'll ask James because I don't know what you're trying to tell me. James, what would you do to differentiate a state that has a better outcome with poverty versus a state that doesn't? How would you define that?
I would actually just look at the specific causes. I mean, in rural states, it has more to do with the changing of industry. There's not as much industry. A lot of manufacturing, for example, has been shipped overseas.
Losing human capital.
You know, in the inner cities, you know, you have a combination of the legacy of racism, along with a culture that's decided that the system is so against them. A lot of them just haven't tried for decades.
I mean, wouldn't it be like in terms of San Francisco, just the lack of social programs?
They have social
no, because
programs.
they have more social programs than anybody. There's too many people to keep up with.
People leaving from the rural places James just identified.
But I can't imagine
I can't imagine where social safety nets are.
If we Americans put a man on the moon with 70s technology,
you guys are not answering my question.
We can fix.
How are you going to define that problem?
Well, I mean, I think James answered it. You talk about the specific of areas, what's causing the poverty, and I mean, we
specific areas so far. So what do you do?
No. So what do you do? So in terms of, you know, if it's a rural area, it has a different solution. You need to stimulate industry, in some fashion. In the inner cities, it's something entirely different. It's going to involve more like social outreach, because you have to break through a culture that doesn't think that that they want to be a part of the system.
Wasn't there like legislation and Build Back Better to put some jobs out there?
Yeah.
Don't say Build Back Better.
Okay.
I mean, build back something.
You take that label.
I don't like Biden. Relax. Just relax. Just relax. Calm down.
Calm down. What a trigger word.
I'm not triggered. I know.
No, I'm talking about.
One of the things that really bothered me with Biden was his trigger. Well, when he was like, no malarkey, I was like, this guy's full of malarkey.
Well, I mean, to speak to that, one of the first things that he did in office was kill the pipeline and killed 10,000 jobs.
Well, but the thing is with the pipeline, I heard the argument. I don't know, to be honest, I don't know enough, but it went all the way to the Gulf Coast. And a lot of people said that's going to be used for domestic use, which I'm like, if it's going to be used for domestic use
again and again and again,
why are you going all the way to the Gulf to ship it out to other countries? And then the pipeline wasn't going to be finished until like 10 years down the line, and never, because that's the thing that made me wonky about it, because they said, well, we could use the oil from the pipeline. I'm like, no, we couldn't. It was not going to be ready to use. You still have to have a distillery or to refine it, a refinery to refine it. But we don't have that.
10,000 jobs without having somewhere to send them.
I agree. That's an issue. And I think the Build Back Better. Oh, sorry. Now, they had infrastructure jobs that were going to be implemented. Could they got transferred to something that was different? I mean,
it depends where the infrastructure. It depends on real specific.
All over the United States, there was a pretty ambitious infrastructure bill.
That actually is pretty vague all over the United States, and I'm not.
Well, I'll go ahead and give you more specific. No, I'll give you more specifics. They were wanting to put like more environmentally friendly industry out there, like wind energy, solar, revamping the installation in old buildings, doing the pipes, getting the lead out. That's all over the country. That's not very vague, because we need a revamp of infrastructure. Even Trump said it. Every politician feeds you that garbage in your ear, but they don't do it. And that was on legislation. And I don't know how sincere Biden was, but it was at least organized for it to get implemented. And people are just like, I don't like the way Build Back Better sounds.
No, my specific problem is that it's like, they wanted to be able to say, make America great again, but they didn't want to use the same words as Trump.
Exactly. I mean, both parties have marketing campaigns.
No.
I mean, they call these things political ads.
There's a difference. There was legislation. There's work that goes into
that. Dude, it's not different. It's exactly the same. Trump had legislation too. He brought back, he
What
wanted to bring
infrastructure
back
legislation are you referring
coal
to?
and get people back to work.
Okay, see, now I can go ahead and make a, I mean, West Virginia is cold. And the coal mines were already going away due to natural gas. They have fracking now in Texas. They're not going to rely on coal. It's costs more money to get. Yeah, there's still areas where coal is kind of
I'm
relevant.
gonna say
but
there's
for the
still a
most,
lot of places where coals are powering the electric plants.
but yeah, I agree. But natural gas is more the reason why coal industry is going away. It's just more efficient. It's cost effective. But there's going to be areas where people are going to have coal because I don't know, but it's
Hey,
going away.
Edward, tell me, because I read, tell me if you know anything about this, but I've heard that some European countries, including Germany, have had to shift back to coal some.
I've
Is
read
that
articles about
applicable
that
to
too.
any of this?
I notice a bit of a blowback against Germany's green push, but I I can't say that I'm an expert on that. But yeah, I mean it's pretty diversified here. Like France has a lot of nuclear power. Germany is very anti-nuclear, so it's hard to talk
I
about
mean,
Europe
I
really.
think it's cheaper than coal to deal with natural gas, and it's also emits less pollution. And that's one of the reasons they're trying to push it. You know, yeah, sure, coal can do what gas does, but gas is better.
Yeah, I mean, but
Probably.
you have to get people in there who aren't being pulled around by corporations, or that at least
Gas is by
are less
corporations,
pulled around.
coals are by
Yeah, I mean, it's you can't do it completely, but I mean, it's just, I mean, I see the Democrats as promising things and then not doing them, and then you have
why aren't they doing them?
they don't want to because their goal is not to serve the people. Their goal is to make money,
Okay,
and
that's the
then
platitude I hear from
produce
a
a
lot of
kind of
people. The
some kind
Republican-led
of
Senate
marketing
is
to get voted for
destroying their
again.
legislation.
Haven't they had
I
like
just don't.
the House and the Senate for like the last 2 years?
Yeah, but they have to have a certain amount of people to go with the legislation for
How many decades are people going to go along with that? It just doesn't.
when
I
has
mean,
infrastructure when has infrastructure been in play? And here again, we're talking about national politics again. To push momentum, it would be a good idea to push a third party candidate in local elections. So when that not Build Back Better bill, but infrastructure bill gets pushed in the
Yeah.
Democrat Party, they have more pressure from other leaders in the state level to say, yeah, we're not going to vote for you until you do it like this. And we'll have more of a say.
I mean, people just need more representation for themselves, and that they're not getting it with the current structure. I mean,
Oh, hey,
one point I think you're both for, and in many ways I am for more state control of politics, right? I mean, but
not
I think,
necessarily.
yeah, and I
Again,
would say an argument against that is, tell me if it's yours as well, but I mean, like with the homelessness in California, you say that um, they're coming from other states. It's easier to be homeless in there, and we also mentioned that like a coal plant will leave, and then West Virginia is just completely poor, and other states don't care about it because it's not their state. Okay, that's why you need a federal government, and that's what I see here in Germany. I mean,
I don't know if I agree with that.
it's much more central here, so you can have states basically helping each other states, which is what they did with the whole of East Germany. I mean that had to be essentially organized. You couldn't just say, okay, Saxony, you deal with all of your crap that you put in your economy for the last 49 years. I mean, the states have to help each other,
Yeah,
and
I
if
agree.
they're
And I donated to candidates in West Virginia. One of my favorite politicians, Richard Ojeda, is from there. He backed unions. That's why I liked him. And he was running against a Trump-backed Republican. And he almost won because he was getting support from people from other states. He closed that big margin. So there's a lot of stuff that gets done to help that momentum. And it's important that we recognize that. And I feel like when you just say, oh, both parties are corrupt. Yeah, and they are more corrupt on the national stage. I agree. But when you start looking more on the local levels, there's a lot of activism that's constructive and that's well informed. that's strategic, especially in Texas. It's kind of turning purple, and thanks to some probably people moving from California that are already here. Before California came, Beto almost beat Cruz.
Yeah.
That's
but I mean, I would rather have Beto win as a non-Democrat or non-Republican.
I'd rather have someone else than Beto. He's a corrupt dude.
Yeah,
he took
right.
money from the fossil fuel company, dude.
Right. I would rather.
There's no one else running
We
against
almost
him.
beat Cruz with this other guy that's a piece of crap that I don't want.
Yeah, he's the lesser one, man.
But the thing is, that's the way it always is. It's just you get less and less corrupt, and you get much less corrupt with numerous parties who can.
But that's not on the table right now, Edward. I'd rather go to less corrupt route than the more corrupt route. And
we've been doing that. We've been doing that since the 50s.
Exactly.
It's not working.
No,
I mean, there's only been two parties since there have been parties, and the founding fathers rightfully didn't want them.
I can give you some ways that there's progress. I mean, because now due to the internet, we could talk to each other. What policies poll higher? I mean, now James and I can definitely talk about policy more, because that's been pushed by people that are more progressive to be mainstream. Medicare for all wasn't something that I knew about, and that's probably not a connection James and I could talk about.
But that's technological. That's not either of the parties pushing for how do we get our voters, all of the voters
through the Democratic debates.
Yeah, plus it's not so much what they say, what the policies are, it's what they do, and what they're doing is lots of war and making a lot of money.
I know, no, and I'm not arguing against that. I'm arguing about economic policy. I mean, like you said, you guys are saying, why do we concentrate on war? And here you guys are concentrating on wars. And I understand that is an important issue, but my focus, that's another thing that's very curious. When I look at non-electoral leftists, they're always focusing on foreign policy instead of just like what would help them in their state.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, local politics, I mean, it makes more sense at the local level, because like if you're in a family, if you're in a company, I think usually things work pretty well. It's just human groups, it's hard to organize large groups of humans. That's true. And I see, and I think like Harari argues this as well, Yuval Harari, that the future looks a lot more like China than any kind of democracy, because they know how to organize billions of people and basically just build a 2 million population city in 5 months, and everybody has to live there, and they're more or less, their animal desires are taken care of.
You think they have to do to control all that people? Because they had one big civil war, and the death toll was like comparable to multiple wars that we were involved in, the Cultural Revolution. And then when somebody has to appoint himself as a leader for life, he's pretty insecure about something. I'm just like, he wants that power. There's probably inner conflict that we don't get to know about because they're really closed with their media.
Yeah, but I mean, something
I don't know.
like that. But something like that is happening in the States, right? I mean, have you heard the surveys of? I mean, it's like half of Americans expect some kind of civil war in their lifetime.
I think that's what the media pushes. I think that's the side.
I mean, I'm just talking to people and just seeing how people don't. I mean, and I'm not saying
you personally talked to. Can you talk to somebody that you personally know that has
all
brought up
all of my
war?
family? No, I'm not saying that they're ready.
I don't know anybody.
Well, I'm just saying that people
one person, one person.
But I'm not saying we're going to line up Confederate soldiers and that kind of thing. But I'm saying when you don't have people solving problems through dialogue, then you have violence, and we saw that on January 6th, and that's recent. That's going to happen again at some point in some way, and again, because I mean, not being able to resolve problems in dialogue leads to violence. Always, it's human history.
Why did that happen?
Because people aren't talking. They could have. It's the same reason why the Russian-Ukrainian war is happening. They can't talk. They can't talk about the problems of there's a third of the Ukraine that speaks Russian, and there's two different groups in there, even more, and they can't talk of a way
You don't
to,
want to hold
okay,
anybody accountable for that action.
You're
You know,
talking
he
about
was just
January
like,
6th?
yeah,
Dude, that didn't happen in a vacuum. Yeah, you've had an
yeah, I mean,
increasing amount of division between
it's
these
our
two
problem.
sides, and they've been provoked to the point where
they've
there's
been lied
no
to.
trust.
They were
I mean,
lied to.
The reason
I'll take,
why that those lies worked is because they had no trust from the other side, because
Okay.
the other side called them Nazis and racists for 5 years.
it's like the truckers in Canada, which I find interesting. I mean, I'm completely against
Okay, all right, and then okay,
the
the
people
trucker
in the coup.
protest was initiated by people that weren't even truckers. They were lied to too.
Well, I mean, the videos I saw, they
A lot
were
of
in,
well, I mean,
they
just
were
look at
in, they were people in Quebec who wanted to talk to the person who they elected, and he wouldn't talk to them. So when that happens, then violence results. That's what happens. He
the
won't
violence were
even talk to them.
escalated by saboteurs. I mean, they weren't
Well,
even people in the
it's
trucking
escalated
industry.
by the government of not talking to these people. And that's the problem when people can't talk. I mean, that's why I like your podcast so much, is because we're actually talking. And
Well,
and and the thing, like, and that's also why I like your point about local politics, is that, people who live locally, they tend to talk, because otherwise they're just punching each other.
yeah, and
So
I'm just looking
you
for the
tend to
truth.
talk and resolve things like, here's my land, here's my fence, okay, let's do this, let's do that. But when people stop talking, like at the national level, and it's just, I think it's game theory, population dynamics. There's 380 million people is quite a bit. That's put stress on democracy.